The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the small town of Saint-Michel, France. Samuel Reed, a middle-aged police officer with a sturdy build and a weathered face, finished his shift, the familiar weight of authority resting comfortably on his shoulders. He slid into his patrol car, the engine purring to life, and navigated the quiet streets. As he drove, the laughter of two young men echoed through the air, drawing his attention. It was Malik and Jamal, both well regarded within the community, known for their kindness and ambition. They strolled together, sharing a joke that sent ripples of laughter between them. Reed slowed his vehicle, watching them for a moment longer than he intended. In that instant, he was reminded of the countless encounters he had experienced with black youths in the town. Incidents that had left him feeling justified but increasingly uneasy. The laughter of Malik and Jamal, however innocent, felt like an affront to the authority he wielded. His face hardened as a familiar instinct kicked in, an urge to assert control. He pulled over, the gravel crunching under his tires as he parked beside the sidewalk. Stepping out of the patrol car, he felt the rush of power course through him, a sense of purpose that had become his companion over the years. The sun glimmered off his badge as he approached the two men, who had momentarily paused in their conversation, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion. "Hey, you two," Reed called out, his voice authoritative, laced with an edge that hinted at his displeasure. "What are you doing out here? Shouldn't you be heading home?" Malik exchanged a quick glance with Jamal, eyebrows raised in surprise at the sudden confrontation. "We're just walking home, officer," Malik replied, maintaining a calm demeanor. "No trouble here." Reed's jaw tightened, a flash of irritation igniting within him. "You know, the area has been experiencing some issues lately. I can't be too careful with you guys hanging around like this," he snapped, his tone dripping with condescension. "Issues? What do you mean by that?" Jamal asked, incredulous. "We live here, officer. We're not causing any problems." Reed's response was swift and cutting. "I've seen plenty of troublemakers look just like you. It's my job to keep this town safe, and I don't need you two messing things up." His stance grew more rigid, as if he were preparing for a confrontation rather than a simple inquiry. Malik, his voice steady yet hurt, attempted to reason with Reed. "We're not troublemakers. We're just trying to get home after a long day. You don't have to treat us like this." The tension in the air thickened, and Reed, emboldened by the authority of his badge, leaned closer. "You don't get to dictate how I do my job. People like you have to realize that your actions have consequences." Jamal shook his head, disbelief flooding his features. "What actions? We haven't done anything wrong." Before the exchange could escalate further, a passerby, a young woman with a smartphone, stopped, her gaze fixed on the unfolding scene. She discreetly began recording, the camera capturing Reed's aggressive posture and the vulnerability of Malik and Jamal. The soft click of the recording feature was hardly audible, but it marked the beginning of a moment that would ripple through their lives. As Reed prepared to issue further orders, his mind clouded by biases and assumptions, he didn't notice the young woman's presence. Instead, he focused on Malik and Jamal, who stood there, confusion etched across their faces, their laughter replaced by a palpable sense of injustice. Unbeknownst to Reed, this confrontation would soon become more than just an encounter. It would trigger a wave of outrage that would challenge the very fabric of their community, igniting a firestorm that would leave no one untouched. In that fleeting moment, a small town in France would find itself on the brink of a reckoning, each character poised to play a role in a story that was just beginning to unfold. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the small French town, the atmosphere was thick with tension and uncertainty. The viral video of Samuel Reed's altercation with Malik and Jamal had spread like wildfire across social media, igniting outrage among the community. Malik and Jamal, once just two young men enjoying their evening, now found themselves at the center of a storm, their faces plastered across news feeds and television screens. In their small apartment, Malik paced the floor, his mind racing. "I can't believe this is happening," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "It's like we're living in a nightmare." Jamal, seated on the couch, looked up from his phone, concern etched across his face. "We need to do something," Malik. We can't just let this blow over. People are talking about us, and we need to make sure they know our side of the story. Malik nodded, determination setting in. You're right. Let's gather our friends. We can organize a rally. Show them that we won't be silenced. Meanwhile, Samuel Reed sat in his living room, scrolling through his phone as the notifications flooded in. Each ping was a reminder of the chaos he had unleashed. Videos of the encounter played on repeat, each one more damning than the last. He leaned back in his chair, a mix of anger and disbelief coursing through him. It's just a misunderstanding, he grumbled to himself. People are overreacting. His wife, Claire, entered the room, her expression serious. Sam, you can't keep doing this. You need to address what happened. People are upset, and it's not going to just go away. Reed shook his head dismissively. I'll talk to my superiors. They'll have my back. This is a small town. It will blow over. Claire crossed her arms, frustration evident in her voice. You're underestimating the situation. You have to understand how your actions affected Malik and Jamal. They're not just names in a video. They're people. Reed stood abruptly, the weight of her words pressing down on him. I did my job. I was trying to keep the peace. He stormed out of the room, leaving Claire to stare after him, worry etched on her face. As protests began to erupt across town, groups of diverse individuals came together, chanting slogans demanding justice. They marched through the streets, their voices rising in solidarity against the injustice they felt. Signs reading, "Justice for Malik and Jamal," and "End Police Brutality," filled the air, the colors vibrant against the backdrop of the town's historic architecture. Among them, Malik and Jamal stood with their friends, their hearts swelling with pride and anger. We're doing this for everyone who has felt the same pain, Malik shouted to the crowd, his voice rising above the others. This isn't just about us. It's about changing the narrative in this town. Jamal stepped forward, his passion evident. We need accountability. We will not be silenced by one man's prejudice. The crowd erupted in applause, their chants echoing through the streets as they marched toward the town square. Back at the police station, Reed's colleagues began to distance themselves, whispering behind closed doors. The camaraderie that once held them together was fraying, fear of backlash creeping into their interactions. Did you see the video? One officer asked, glancing around to ensure no superiors were listening. It's all over. People are furious. Reed overheard their hushed tones, his heart sinking. He had always been a figure of authority, but now he felt the walls closing in. As he walked through the station, he could sense the judgment in their eyes, the distance growing between him and those he once considered allies. Later that evening, the town council convened an emergency meeting to address the escalating tensions. Reed sat among them, his palms sweaty, a knot forming in his stomach. The council members exchanged worried glances, their voices low as they discussed the community's outrage. As he exited the meeting, Reed overheard two townsfolk debating just outside the door. Do you think he really meant to hurt them? One man asked, concern in his voice. I don't know, the other replied. But it doesn't matter. People are tired of this. They want change. Reed's heart raced as he listened, the realization hitting him hard. He was losing control. The very fabric of his life was unraveling, and the town he had always thought of as his was now divided. In that moment, the weight of his actions bore down on him, and he understood that the path forward was fraught with uncertainty. As he walked away, the echoes of the protest chants lingered in his mind, a haunting reminder of the reckoning that loomed ahead. Malik stood at the podium, his heart racing as he surveyed the sea of faces before him. The press conference was not just a formality. It was a chance to speak out against the injustices they had faced and to galvanize the community in their quest for justice. Jamal stood beside him, his expression a mix of determination and apprehension. The room was packed, a testament to the outrage that had gripped the town since the incident with Officer Reed. Thank you all for being here today, Malik began, his voice steady despite the nerves that threatened to overwhelm him. We are here to talk about what happened to us, but more importantly, we are here to talk about the systemic racism that is alive and well in our community. Jamal nodded, stepping forward to add, this isn't just about us. It's about every black person who has felt the sting of prejudice, the weight of discrimination. We are tired of being treated as if our lives don't matter. The audience murmured in agreement, and Malik felt a surge of courage. He took a deep breath and continued. On that day, Officer Reed didn't just violate our rights. He violated our humanity. We were walking home, unarmed and innocent, and yet we were treated like criminals. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. And this is not an isolated incident. It's a pattern that needs to be addressed. As Malik spoke, the room filled with a palpable energy. Reporters scribbled notes, and cameras clicked incessantly. Malik spotted a few familiar faces in the crowd, friends who had rallied around them, community members who were ready to stand up against injustice. Meanwhile, across town, Samuel Reed sat in his living room, fingers clenched around the remote control. The press conference flickered on the screen, and he felt a surge of anger wash over him. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath, his face flushed with disbelief. "They're making me the villain." Claire, his wife, entered the living room, her expression cautious. "Sam, you need to listen to what they're saying. This is serious." "Serious?" Reed scoffed, his voice rising. "They're twisting the narrative. I was just doing my job. I was trying to keep the community safe." Claire shook her head, her eyes filled with concern. "But at what cost? You can't just ignore the fact that your actions have consequences. Look at the protests, the outrage. This isn't going to blow over." Reed turned away, the tension in the room thickening. "They're just looking for someone to blame. It's a witch hunt. Or maybe it's a call for accountability," Claire replied, her tone firm. "You need to take a step back and really consider what happened. Your duty is to protect everyone, not just those who look like you." As the press conference continued, Reed's anger morphed into something deeper, fear. For the first time in his career, he felt vulnerable. The messages had started rolling in, threats, insults, and accusations. His phone buzzed incessantly, notifications lighting up the screen. "You won't get away with this," one read. "We're coming for you, Reed." "Claire, what if they come after me?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "What if someone tries to hurt me?" "Sam, you're a police officer. You're trained for this," she replied, trying to reassure him. "But you need to acknowledge your role in this. You can't keep burying your head in the sand." Back at the press conference, Malik concluded with a rallying call. "We need change. We need our voices to be heard, and we need justice. This isn't just about our story. It's about the future of our community. We are stronger together, and we will not be silenced." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of solidarity washing over them. Malik and Jamal exchanged glances, their expressions filled with hope. They had sparked something in their community, an awakening that could no longer be ignored. As they stepped away from the podium, the weight of their experience began to feel lighter, buoyed by the support that surrounded them. In contrast, Reed sat alone in his living room, consumed by a storm of emotions, anger, fear, and a growing sense of isolation. The walls that had once felt like a fortress were closing in, and he could no longer escape the reality of the situation he had created. The town was changing, and he was at the eye of the storm, uncertain of what would come next. Samuel Reed sat in the sterile conference room, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glare on his face as he waited for his superiors to arrive. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel the weight of their disappointment pressing down on him like a lead blanket. As the door creaked open, Chief Lambert entered, flanked by Officer Harris and Lieutenant Monroe, their expressions a mix of concern and disapproval. "Samuel," Chief Lambert began, his voice steady but firm, "we need to talk about what happened last week." He gestured for Reed to sit, the closing of the door behind him echoing ominously. Reed nodded, his heart racing. "I understand, Chief. I just want to clarify." "Clarify?" Lambert interrupted, leaning forward. "You want to clarify the video that's gone viral? The one where you're seen berating two young men in our community?" Reed swallowed hard, his throat dry. "They were acting suspiciously. I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Harris chimed in, crossing his arms. "You were aggressive, Samuel. You escalated a situation that didn't need to be escalated. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about the trust our community has in us. Reed clenched his fists, feeling the heat rise to his face. You think I wanted this? This wasn't my intention. I've been a cop for over 20 years. I know what I'm doing. Your actions suggested otherwise, Monroe replied, his voice calm but laced with disappointment. We're receiving calls from community leaders, citizens, even our own officers. People are scared, Samuel. They don't know if they can trust you or the department. I'm not the enemy here. Reed's voice rose, fueled by frustration. I've always been on their side. On whose side? Lambert asked, his tone now softer but probing. You're not just a police officer, you're a representative of this town. You need to understand the implications of your actions. Reed felt a knot tightening in his stomach. I know I made a mistake, but I'm here to fix it. Just give me a chance. Fix it? Harris scoffed. You can't just wish this away. You need to reflect on what happened, and more importantly, why it happened. If you don't, you could face serious consequences. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Reed felt his heart sink. He was at a crossroads, and he could sense the gravity of the situation. After the meeting, Reed returned to his desk, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The phone rang, breaking the silence of his thoughts. He picked it up, recognizing the voice on the other end as that of a local journalist, Jenna Mendez. Officer Reed, thank you for taking my call, Jenna said, her tone professional but probing. I'd like to request an interview regarding the incident with Malik and Jamal. I think it's important for your side of the story to be heard. Reed hesitated. I don't know if that's a good idea, Samuel, she pressed gently. This could be your opportunity to clarify your actions and show the community you're willing to engage. It's not just about defending yourself. It's about addressing the bigger issue. He sighed heavily, knowing that ignoring the opportunity might only make things worse. Okay, let's do it. I'll meet you tomorrow. The next day, Reed sat in Jenna's makeshift studio, a small room filled with cameras and lights. He fidgeted in his chair, the weight of her gaze weighing on him as she prepared to ask her questions. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, Officer Reed, Jenna began, her tone warm but serious. Let's start with the incident itself. Many people are upset about how you handled the situation with Malik and Jamal. What do you have to say about that? Reed inhaled sharply, the words catching in his throat. I understand their frustration. I truly do. But you have to understand, I was trying to do my job. I thought they were involved in something illegal. And yet, the video shows you being confrontational, Jenna pressed, her voice unwavering. Do you believe your actions were justified? He shifted in his seat, feeling the pressure of her questions. I didn't mean to come off as aggressive. It's just, I've seen things in this town. There are issues we need to address, and sometimes that means being firm. Firmness is one thing, Samuel. But there's a line, Jenna replied, her eyes piercing. Many people feel that your actions that day were rooted in something deeper. Prejudice, perhaps? How do you respond to that? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught, lodged somewhere deep inside him. He felt the weight of his choices pressing down, his mind racing with memories of past encounters, of assumptions made, and of a community he had sworn to protect but had inadvertently harmed. I don't know, he stammered, the confession slipping out before he could stop it. I need to think about it. I've always believed I was doing the right thing, but maybe I was wrong. Jenna tilted her head, observing him closely. That's a start, Samuel. Recognizing the potential for error is the first step toward understanding, but you need to dig deeper than that. What does this mean for you moving forward? As Reed grappled with the implications of his past and the uncertain future ahead, he felt a sense of urgency to confront not just the community's anger but his own complicity in its pain. The interview was a mere reflection of the turmoil brewing within him, a prelude to a reckoning he had never anticipated. Samuel Reed sat at the dimly lit bar, nursing a whiskey that had long since lost its chill. The clinking of glasses and low murmur of voices surrounded him, but he felt a world apart, marooned in his thoughts. The events of the past few days played on a loop in his mind, The viral video, the protests, the accusations that hung over him like a storm cloud. He wanted nothing more than to escape the judgment of the townsfolk, the whispers that followed him like a shadow. As he stared into his glass, the raucous laughter of two men at the end of the bar cut through his reverie. Their voices rose above the din, discussing something that piqued Reed's interest. "Did you hear about the Reed family?" one of them said, his tone laced with incredulity. "Turns out, they've been here longer than we thought. You know they were involved in that plantation back in the day?" "Seriously?" the other man replied, his brow furrowing. "I thought the Reeds were just another family in town. What's the story?" Reed leaned closer, his heart racing. He had always known his family's history was murky, but this, his family connected to a plantation? He felt a swell of anger. How dare they speak about his family in such a way? But another part of him was curious, the kind of curiosity that gnaws at the edges of one's sanity. "They say some of the old records show they owned slaves," the first man continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "And despite all that, you should see how he treats the black community now. It's like he forgot where he came from." Reed's fists clenched around the glass, the ice rattling against the sides. He had been the one to uphold the law, to protect the community, yet here he was, the butt of a joke. A sudden wave of shame washed over him, and he pushed his drink away, feeling bile rise in his throat. He needed answers. He couldn't let this go unchallenged. As he stumbled out of the bar, the cool night air hit him like a slap, invigorating yet sobering. He drove home in a daze, the weight of the men's words pressing down on him. Once inside, he found his mother in the kitchen, her back turned as she washed a pot. The smell of something simmering filled the air, but it did little to ease his turmoil. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation. "Mom," he began, his voice low but trembling with urgency. "I need to talk to you about our family history. I heard something tonight, something about us owning slaves. Is it true?" His mother froze, the sound of running water abruptly stopping. She turned slowly, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Samuel, I didn't think you'd ever ask about that. Why didn't you tell me?" he pressed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Why would you keep something like that from me? It explains so much about the way I've been treated, the way I've treated others." She sighed, her shoulders sagging under the weight of years. "I didn't want you to carry that burden. I grew up with stories, Samuel. Stories of our ancestors who came to this town, who worked the land but also took advantage of others. It was a different time, but that doesn't excuse it. I wanted you to make your own choices." "Choices?" he echoed, anger boiling over. "I've made choices based on ignorance. How could you let me walk around with this blindfold on?" "Because I hoped you'd be better than us," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I hoped you'd rise above the mistakes of the past." Reed felt tears prick his eyes, a mix of rage and sorrow coursing through him. "And yet, here I am, at the center of a scandal, repeating history in a different form. I thought I was protecting the community, but I was just perpetuating the same cycle." His mother's gaze softened, filled with understanding. "You can change this, Samuel. You have the power to choose differently, to break the cycle, but you have to confront your biases first." He stood there, the gravity of her words settling over him like a heavy cloak. The anger that had fueled his actions began to dissipate, replaced by a deep, unsettling realization. He was more than just a police officer in a small town. He was a product of a history he had never fully understood. "Mom, I need to figure this out. I can't go back to the way things were. I have to confront the truth," he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of his newfound understanding. As the silence enveloped them, Reed knew he was standing at a crossroads, one that would determine not just his future but the future of the community he had sworn to protect. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting warm hues over the small town, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Amina, a local activist with a calm yet commanding presence, stood at the forefront of an organized rally in the town square. Banners emblazoned with messages of unity and healing fluttered in the gentle breeze, and a diverse crowd gathered, their faces a mix of hope and determination. They had come together to demand change, to seek justice, and to forge a path toward reconciliation. Today, we stand together. Amina spoke, her voice steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. We are not just here to protest. We are here to heal. We are here to show our community that we can overcome our differences and build a future where everyone is respected and valued. Among the crowd, Samuel Reed stood awkwardly, feeling out of place yet compelled to be there. His heart raced, knowing that this was a pivotal moment for him, and for Malik and Jamal. He had decided to attend not just out of obligation, but out of a desperate need to confront the consequences of his actions. Clad in his police uniform, he felt the weight of judgment from the crowd, but he was resolved to face it. As the rally progressed, Amina called Malik and Jamal to the stage, encouraging them to share their experiences. The brothers stepped forward, visibly nervous yet determined. Malik's voice trembled slightly as he addressed the crowd. "We never wanted this attention," he began, glancing at Jamal, who nodded in solidarity. "All we wanted was to walk home without fear. But what happened to us was not just an isolated incident. It's a reflection of a larger issue that affects so many in our community." Jamal added, "We are grateful for the support we've received, and we hope that this rally leads to meaningful change. But we can't do this alone. It requires all of us, every single one, to stand up and demand justice and respect." As they spoke, Reed felt a surge of regret wash over him. Their words struck a chord deep within, echoing the revelations he had unearthed about his family's history. He had wronged them, and now he felt the need to make amends, to publicly acknowledge his mistakes. With a heavy heart, Reed stepped up to the microphone, feeling the eyes of the crowd on him. Silence fell, and he could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. "I know that I have caused pain," he began, his voice wavering. "I've let my prejudices cloud my judgment and treated two young men, two members of this community, unjustly. For that, I am deeply sorry." The crowd reacted with a mix of anger and skepticism. Some shouted in disbelief, while others expressed support. Reed pressed on, his voice gaining strength. "What I've learned about my family's history has opened my eyes to the systemic racism that has plagued our town for generations. I recognize that I am part of the problem, and I am committed to being part of the solution. I want to learn, to grow, and to understand the experiences of those I've wronged." As he spoke, he saw Malik and Jamal exchanging glances, their expressions a complex mix of emotions. Would they accept his apology? Was it enough? Just as he finished, a commotion broke out in the back of the crowd, and a figure pushed forward, holding a stack of papers. "Samuel Reed," the figure shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. "I have a report here that implicates you in previous misconduct. You can't just stand here and pretend to be a changed man." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Reed felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. The old report detailed accusations of excessive force, a dark shadow from his past that he had hoped to leave behind. He felt a rush of panic as police officers began to move toward him, their expressions grim. Malik and Jamal, sensing the shift, stepped back, their earlier resolve now mingled with uncertainty. The crowd erupted into chaos, some demanding justice while others rallied behind Reed, still grappling with their complex feelings about the man they once viewed as an authority figure. As Reed was led away by the officers, he caught a glimpse of Malik and Jamal, who stood tall amidst the chaos, their dignity intact. The rally that had started as a call for healing had morphed into a powerful reminder of the fight for justice. In that moment, Reed realized that while his journey was far from over, the community was beginning to heal. Malik and Jamal were becoming symbols of resilience, turning pain into strength and leading the way toward a new chapter in their lives, one where hope and unity prevailed.